Welcome to the Mixorcist.
Hey, B, how's it going?
Hey, good. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Mixorcist.
Welcome to the Mixorcist. You been watching any horror movies lately?
Yeah, I have. I saw one. It's called The Girl on the Third Floor. It's on Netflix. Pretty cool. I'll just say it's a haunted house story and maybe not give too much beyond that, but that was a good watch. I really enjoyed it. Girl on the Third Floor.
Nice. I watched finally got around to The Ritual. You ever seen The Ritual?
No, I don't believe I have.
It's very good. And I also watched another one called Ready or Not, which I went by the Fangoria Awards, and that was one of the ones that won a couple. It's worth sticking around to the end. It's a little bit gimmicky, but it's a lot of fun. And the ending is just like, oh, that's awesome. You'll dig it.
Nice.
So you know what I've been doing a lot of, though, is a ton of mixing the past couple weeks.
Yeah, me too.
You? Yeah. I've been using a lot Acustica Opal.
Oh, I love that.
Isn't it a great plugin?
I can boost more stuff with that EQ without it, starting to sound weird where you go, oh, that's too much. It's like, no, it's like, how much do you want to go?
But it's got a little character though. It's undeniable. And now it's very useful on the mix bus, but I've actually been using it for instruments too. Like I've been using it to carve deep because I like my API style EQs, and I found I was able to get there with the plugin. So it's pretty flexible. Yeah, and I'm actually, I'm wondering what it was designed for. You know what would be cool? Wouldn't it be great if the designer, John Oram himself, were here?
Well, I mean, we'd have a million questions for him, wouldn't we?
Well, at least a million, maybe 1,000,010. Oh, look, there he is. John, how you doing, brother?
Hi, guys.
So look at that console.
Yeah.
What are we looking at there?
Yeah, that's what we call the Oram Pro 80. It's an interesting board in as much that I created that thing. It's 48 channels there, but it has 96 channels in remix, all with faders and EQ. So although it's 48 wide, it's in 2 layers. And it's interesting. It's a 5.1 surround board if you want it. And of course, that's useful because if you're not working 5.1, you've got a left-right buzz to the front and a left-right buzz to the back, completely separate, and you can route to either front or back. And so a lot of guys they actually create 2 separate mixes on the one board at the same time.
Wow!
And it's totally analog. The first 16 faders from the left-hand end have got like silver caps on them. They're moving faders. They're motorized and very, very high quality in terms of their capability of resolution. But all the faders are good. And the novelty of the board is that if I move my head to one side, you'll see that not that way, this way. You'll see that the 8 to the right-hand end are black and the rest are in the Oram blue. And the black ones are actually replica Trident Series 80 modules. So they're transformer coupled on the mic pre's. They've got the same EQ as I designed for the Series 80. And when I designed the board, I made sure that the edge connector connections on each module was identical to the Orams. So you can put any combination of Tridents and Orams in the same frame. And of course, I don't make Trident anymore, although I could always build them again. There's a studio in Nashville called Treasure Isle, and they couldn't make their mind up what they wanted. So they said, all right, well, I have 24 channels of Oram and 24 channels of Trident. And so they've got the best of both worlds because obviously a lot of their market is with the original Trident Series 80 format. So, yeah, it's a nice board. And this one is for sale, in fact, because this is in my studio in Spain, which is about to be closed because of COVID. The volume of work that can come through is so small.
Right.
And it's a high-end studio. I mean, they're big. It's a very big room there. We're monitoring there on Tannoy DMT 215s, and there's a 1200 watts a side MOSFET power amp, so it's a powerful room. but it's frustrating because to run a room like that, we have the main recording room will take a 50-piece orchestra, and the second room will take a band probably up to, I don't know, 18, 20 guys.
Wow.
But to get that kind of work in is going to be a problem. And I don't see the music industry and recording, I don't see it coming back to its anticipated normal state, whatever normal is. I don't see that now for not just this year. I don't see it next year either. I think it will be 2023 before we really see musicians earning real money, record labels putting up the right kind of money, you know. So well, it's a worry. It's a problem because I invested a lot in that building.
Of course.
But I'm going to relocate. Although I'm going to sell all this gear that's in there. I have another one of these boards in my factory here in England. So finding another 48 channel board is not a problem.
Right. So just to be clear, that console's not on your boat, right? Because that would just be too much to handle, John. So first I want to thank you for being here. I mean, for those of you who don't know John, you have an incredible history in the music and technology business. So I'm going to summarize it because many have heard it and there are other places to get this info. I want to honor your history and your work, but at the same time, I want to get to some questions that nobody's ever heard before, so they can really get to know you. So let's just wheel through them real quick. You started out as a musician. You've been a drummer. You've recorded with Marianne Faithfull. You worked for Vox. Once you got your start, you were working for Vox, and you helped design some amps that the Beatles used. You were working on the Vox wah pedal, which is an incredible iconic instrument.
Yes.
You have worked for Trident. You've had your own business. You've created your own boards, and now you're in the plug-in game too. You've created this really awesome plug called Opal, which is a model of one of your equalizers. I want to thank you for being with the Mixorcist. This is a real pleasure for us.
Yeah, you know, the name Opal is quite interesting. I really didn't know the Acustica Audio guys at all until last year. And I have wanted to have a plugin. And I'll be honest, they're the first company I've found that can actually do it. As I'm sure you know, many companies use, you know, algorithms, mathematical formulas to create the sound. They don't do that. They actually sample every position of every switch, every button, every control knob. And the only people that have really faithfully reproduced the sound of their unit. But they have a boss, his name's Giancarlo and DeSoldo, and he names all the equipment with a color so that all the products they sell are named after colors. And the marketing guy said to me, we're going to call your unit the Opal. So I said, great, makes sense. And he went, does it? And I said, of course it does.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I said, because OPAL spells Oram Professional Audio Limited. That's the name of my company.
How perfect is that?
And they hadn't realized that.
That worked out awesome.
Yeah.
John, you know what? I would love to have a conversation with you that's different than any other conversation so that people can really get to know you. There's a saying that, you know, when you're building things, running a business, you should scratch your own itch. So I'm curious, to what extent does your musical background inform the gear that you create, or is it all pure joy around the electronics? Give us a sense of how you came to build the stuff that you build.
Okay, yeah. I mean, it's been a combination of all things. I mean, I when you start out, you don't know all the answers. Of course not. You're learning. But it didn't take me long to realize that if you're going to make electronic equipment for musicians, you need to be one yourself, and you need to understand those foibles. You know, I started working with lots of people, and let me make it clear. I mean, it was a nice introduction you gave me, but in those early days, I mean, I started at 15. I mean, I went to college and I was studying electronics, but in terms of developing products, yeah, sure. I mean, it's a team effort, and I had the great fortune of being involved with Vox, and they were in the same town where I was living, so there was a coincidence. And the founder of Vox was a guy called Tom Jennings, who was an absolute genius in his own right, a good musician. with a great attitude towards bringing new things out. And in those days, let's get it right. I mean, when he started, there was no Marshall. Just the same as when I started designing consoles, there was no SSL, and there was, I mean, Rupert Neve was there, God bless him. But obviously, he wasn't into music at all, Rupert. He wasn't a musician as such. And so he was into broadcast and very high standard engineering. And my experiences, therefore, came from the people that I bumped into, the people that I worked with. The guy that I was attached to was sort of my mentor in those days. Vox was a guy called Dick Denny, who was the creator of the Vox AC30. Right. And it's such a classic now. We all know it. But in those early days, I mean, it was uncertain. And it's a fact of life here. It's an interesting tale. But Dick was very hard of hearing. And you had to shout at him to have a normal conversation. But a fabulous guitar player. He played in the style of Django Reinhardt. And during the war, Second World War, Dick was involved in music with a team of guys that entertained troops, what we called Ensa. And he had a little duo that he worked with a guy on violin, fiddle, and that guy's name was James Howe, and James was the founder of Rotor Sound Strings. So if you're into guitars, you'll know it was James, and he played in the style of Stefan Grappelli. And of course, with Dick playing Django Reinhardt, they had their own little hot club of England, not hot club of Paris, duo, And the great thing with Dick was he used to do all the voicing on the amplifiers, and we used to say, "Oh, Dick, oh, it's not just loud, it's really sharp." And he said, "No, it's nice." He couldn't hear it. It's funny how you get these anomalies with people who, to him, it was a nice balanced response, pretty flat for him. Everyone else, it was tearing your head off. But That's what made it famous, because it was a great amp, and it was great for lead guitar and rhythm and stuff, albeit only 30 watts ploughing into two 12-inch speakers. But it could beat the pants off of amps that were rated at 100 watts. So
wow.
No, it was a good vibe. And the same thing with when I went on to Trident. I mean, I was there. I worked very closely with their managing director, and he used to come up with the ideas. I used to come up with the circuits. And then after a while, I mean, I was already running my own studio, so I had my own ideas. And it's not until you sit and you do a session and you think, well, I need to, if only I had a knob here that did this or it did that. And that's how you create, and that's how things come about. So, yeah, I mean, it's been a great time, but I believe in team spirit and team attitude. And yeah, in later years, of course, I was leading my own team, just the same with Trident. I mean, I had 14 years with Trident as a design consultant, where I created the Flexi Mix and TSM Series 80, Series 75, 65, Trimix, all these various brands that became famous in their own right. And I left the company after 14 years. And in 3 years, having gone, the company closed down. So I thought, well, it's ridiculous. Can't let it go. And I had a lot of customers coming at me at trade shows. I was selling Oram then, and they said, well, are you ever going to make the black stuff? That was the Trident. And I said, well, I don't know. If there's a market, yeah, I should. So I did. I reformed that company in 1998, and I ran it for 10 years. And then in 2008, I sold the trademarks on to the current people that are running that brand. But no, it's been a good time, and I think the 24 years of Trident that I had totally was a great learning curve, working with a lot of super engineers that were young when they started, just as me. I was a young guy, and you meet guys like Roy Thomas Baker and Gus Dudgeon and Robin Cable, all ex-Trident engineers, fabulous guys. But in their days, they were learning too, but they were having hit records.
Right.
Trident was involved. The original Trident company was involved with Elton John at the beginning, or Reginald Dwight, as his name is. Therefore there was an involvement. Then they found the singer, and he needed a band, so they put a band behind the singer. That was Freddie Mercury.
Oh my God.
So, these are classic names. And when you're working with guys like that, particularly in your early development stages, you're thinking, oh boy, I could give these guys maybe a bit more top, a bit more bottom, a bit more headroom, a bit more this, a bit more that.
Yeah.
So, that was my vibe. And this business with plugins, I'd wanted plugins for years, and without mentioning anybody, because I don't want to give them any, there's nothing against them. They're all successful companies, but basically all the main American plugin companies tried to do what Acustica Audio have done. And I made it clear that I was not prepared to let them put the unit out unless it really satisfied the brief. Wow. Which it has.
Let me ask you one more question, then I'm going to turn it over to Eric for a bit. But you mentioned a bunch of things about innovation and failure, and I've heard you mention in the past the importance of having great mentors and so on. But that brings me to a question. You've had so many designs, and I'm sure some of them have done better than others, and some of them have been more satisfying to you, talking about scratching your own itch. But were there any designs that got left on the table, like things that you really wanted to build or really felt would hit a need, and then it landed in the market and it just, either turned out way more successful or way less successful than you intended?
I can honestly say no to that. Good. Because any product that I've ever designed has been as a result of conversation and involvement with other people. And I don't mean to say that they're designers, but they've made an input, And for example, I've known Al Schmidt for many, many years now, 40 plus years. And when Al heard one of my compressors, he said, yeah, this is great. I love it because it's detailed. And that word gave me an impression of what does he mean. And by working more on detail, I don't think any electronic design is necessarily easy to do, but to make it good and to get analog audio good, you've got to spend a lot of time listening. You can't throw it together in an evening and say, oh, yeah, there you go, that works. Well, yeah, maybe it does, but does it really work? Does it really go to the extent, And I got involved with a guitar player 30 years ago now, called Uli John Roth, who was German, who was the lead guitarist with the Scorpions. Yep. And I met Uli. I was running a company then that I'd started called Reflex, and it was Reflex Guitar Systems. It was eventually became Reflex Music Technology. And when I met Uli, he was a brilliant player, but he created a new guitar that had like 23 frets. And so it was a special cutaway. You had to get right up the top there. And, but it was 7 strings, and he wanted some pickups that could preamplify it. And, when I first met Uli, without going into too much detail on that, I did create a product called the Mega Wing, which he sells now and is accredited to me. It's a licensed product electronically, but it was his ideas that made that fly. And the point I'm making here is that he could pick up the guitar through an amp with the system, and just by playing one chord, he could hear harmonics that were within that chord that on first listen, you probably wouldn't detect.
Right.
And, I'd say, what are you listening for, Uli? And he'd go, oh, yes, I can hear green. He described sound in colors. I can hear green. I get green at the very top. And after a while, I got to know what he was meaning. And scientifically, he was saying that there's like an 11th harmonic that's in there, and he could get it, you know. Mm-hmm. And he said, "You don't get that. I've got Seymour Duncan pickups. I don't get any green." You know, and I said, "Okay, well, fine, let's keep going." And by listening intently for hours and hours and hours and hours, particularly with overdriven guitar, when it's like in a fuzz box mode, you're creating so many more harmonics that are in the string, you know.
Right.
And so the point I'm making is that analog to me is a fine listening experience. But I also know that same fine listening experience exists in the brain of Al Schmidt, for example, who, you know, you look at Al when he's working, and before he even turns the mixer on, he's in the recording room with the microphones, and he's down on the floor, and his ears are at the same level as the mics, and he's crawling around on the floor. And you look at him, and he's listening to what the microphone's really hearing, you know. And so he'll move the mic, or he'll change the mic. And I've seen him do this, and it's brilliant. And by the time he gets back in the control room and the console is on, he doesn't need to use a great degree of EQ, but he likes EQ for effect rather than surgical changing of the sound. So the sound comes out the microphone, comes up the cable, and then when he gets it in through the right mic pre, Al's listening, and he's sensitive as hell, you know. Wow. And when I did the high-def EQ, which is the hardware that the Opal is made of, I put in there a specific level control. So it's got plus or minus 18 dBs of boost and cut across 8 bands. And next to that is a detail button. And when you push it in, and this is also on the software, of course, on the Opal, when you push that in, that plus or minus 18 reduces to plus or minus 6. Yep. So you can easily get a half, even a quarter of a dB adjustment on that. And it's not until you start playing around at those levels. It's very easy to wang a lot of EQ in all the way down. Mm-hmm. Probably sounds great, but it may not necessarily have the same subtlety and neatness when you're using tiny amounts, you know.
I've been using the detail a lot, and I love it. It's great for that fine-grained control, which sometimes when you're doing that mix bus or mastering, you don't need a ton.
I had a question, and it sort of comes full circle because, you know, as we know now, we're in the internet age, and we're more or less connected. We're having this conversation now across 2 continents, almost in real time. You know, it's not fast enough to do with the latency to jam music yet, but it's pretty good now. But quite some years ago, you had a system that we talked about called the Light system. Yeah. And this would enable studios, well, maybe you could just describe it a bit, because my understanding was it would enable studios in different cities to synchronize their consoles together.
Yeah, I've still got the prototype of that, and it's a sad, I mean, everything in life is ups and downs, and when you know, I'm 72 in May, so I've got a bit of experience in life, and particularly having started in music at 15, you know, it's 57 years. And my interest always was to have the ultimate product. And I think as a designer, we all dream of that, you know. You're driving your Ford car, and then you move up to your Cadillac, and then you've got your Rolls Royce, and then you want your Ferrari. These things are always steps ahead, you know, one after the other. And in a console sense, I desperately wanted to have an all singing, all dancing, fantastic product. And I obviously had to draw a specification. And obviously the first thing, it had to be analog. And also it had to be more than analog. It had to be digitally controlled so that we could get total recall in the true sense, not the SSL sense of total recall where you've got to bring a kid in to adjust all the knobs. No, this is full electronic, push a button. And it wasn't unique. Other people had done some of that. But I wanted to get the audio path right, which I did. I wanted to get the digital control part right, which I wasn't capable of doing because my electronic knowledge is limited to analog, which is fairly expensive. But I never wanted to be the digital engineer. That was never my brief. And that's strange again, because I always had a fear that if I got too involved in digital design, I might forget the analog design. And, you have your feature points. And I thought, okay, I put a few ads out, and I flew into Chicago, and I went to a hotel, and I had interviews with digital electronic engineers. Most digital boards were built around a digital chip called a SHARC, an SHARC. Yeah. And that SHARC chip was famous, but everybody in the industry that was building a digital board, not digital analog, but a pure digital board, they were all using that same product, And I didn't like it because when that crashed, the whole board went out. Mm-hmm. And I made contact with Motorola, who had just finished the design of a new computer chip, which was the 486. That was as far as we'd got in computers. And obviously the predecessor to the 486 was the 386. And I contacted Motorola and I said, how many of those 386 control chips have you got? And they said, oh, yeah, yes, probably several 100,000. And I said, good, give me a price for them, so I want to buy them. And the concept was that every channel, every input strip would have a 386 computer chip of its own. And all the memory functions running down there, all the push buttons, all the bots were processed into that chip, feeding its own RAM, its own memory, and then process the audio out the end as it would normally. The great thing was that if a chip crashed, you just lost one channel because all the others were independently running. And by some clever trickery, I was able to say that if channel 10 did crash for some reason, it would be detected within a matter of microseconds and instantly switch all the I/O, all the inputs and the outputs would switch it over to channel 41, and no one even knew that 10 had gone out. So it was a nice redundancy type concept. And while we were in this independent status, channel for channel, the idea was that, okay, if we use, at that time, we were just getting into navigation systems in yachts and cars. We were getting TomTom, navigators. And the idea, therefore, was to say, okay, then why don't we control this wonderful magic word that we get coming out of each channel? Why don't we get them all and hook them up with a GPS system and have the desk talking up to usual GPS satellite with data, and if there's another desk of a similar ilk in another country or in another town or on the other side of the world, why don't we hook them all up so that they can talk to each other? And so if you touch the HF boost control on channel 1 over here in England, we could get the same effect with the console that was sitting in Canada. Channel 1 would move at the same time.
That's insane.
And again, you see, this was as a result of a conversation and a knowledge that Al Schmidt had, where he had Barbara Streisand in a studio in LA doing a vocal, while he had the orchestra in New York, in Manhattan. And they were hooking up and they did this multiple recording, but that was all done with ISDN lines, as they're called. They were signal lines. And they weren't that fast, so to do it properly, to get the right resolution and the whole thing to work, you had to have 2 ISDN lines running in parallel, and you could then get the performance, speed, and whatever. So that worked. I mean, they had that. But it wasn't the consoles that were changing. It was just the audio lines that were being shared. again, we were learning. We learned about latency and what does that mean? Is is that a real problem? Well, yeah, maybe. So let's see. But by buffering and all the tricks, digital tricks, it was overcome. And the whole reason why that product, I've still got the prototype, the reason why that never got to market, and it was frustrating because I had targeted the sale price of the console to have 96 channels, all digitally controlled and storable and remote readable. I targeted that at £500,000, £500,000 per console, which was not unreasonable when an SSL board at that time was selling out at £380,000 to £450,000.
Right.
And I'd taken it to the AES show in San Francisco, and then the following year it went to New York, and it went to Europe. And I'd actually written 13 orders, unlucky for some, and hence a turnover of £6.5 million. And to finance it, I went to my bank and I said, look, I've got this new product. And I know you won't understand it, but I need £650,000 to finalize the development. And they said, okay. I showed them all the figures and they said, well, it's not unreasonable, You want a tenth of what it's going to turn over. So pretty good. We'll do it. I got the money. I had to put my house on the line, which was a bit dodgy. And and of course, what killed the whole project? And I'd taken deposits, I'd sold boards, and what killed it was 9/11, and four or five, I can't remember now, five I think it was, studios on Manhattan had ordered it. Some had even paid me some money, and there was with the towers coming down, they were petrified, and they said, no, we believe next week the target will be the Empire State Building, and we don't want to do it, and we're sorry, we're going to close our studios, we're running off to the hills, we know these guys are coming after us and they're going to cause us grief. And it killed it. And in fact 4 out of 5 said, keep the deposit, don't even give us anything back. And I said, no, I can't do that. I'll give you some more equipment, different equipment. But some of them, they were that concerned, didn't want to go forward. Wow. And so that is my biggest regret, is not being able to finalize that and bring it to the market. And there was a time too when analog was not flavor of the month. And, I had guys coming up to me at trade shows saying, wow, John, what are you going to do now? Analog's dead. And I'd go, I don't know. I'll have to get a job.
So, John, I do remember reading it's probably an interview that you'd done quite a while ago, and it was about transistors, and it was about making the change from germanium transistors to silicon transistors. And I know that there is in vintage audio, people talk about germanium and how it sounds. I'm just wondering what were the advantages of moving to silicon? Is there anything audio-wise about germanium that's worth using in designs today and that sort of thing?
Yeah. Well, we got to consider here that the germanium silicon story is about evolution. Okay. The very first transistors were, they were constructed with two specific chemicals. Germanium and indium were the two materials that you had a barrier layer of germanium, then a layer of indium, and then a layer of germanium on the back, and the whole thing was fused together, and that's what made the semiconductor. And of course, it was brilliant when it came out because it was something new. But the big problem with germanium was that it's scientifically possesses characteristics which make it attractive in terms of audio signal path. Every semiconductor, by its definition, means that it's a conductor in one direction rather than two. And that's the term semiconductor. And that effect is forms what we call a diode. It's where there's two electrodes put together, diode, and the product using germanium is such that I'm trying not to be too technical here, but in technical terms, you have a knee, which is a step that you have to get over before you get into a linear analog mode. And the typical knee of a germanium diode or two conductors is typically 0.15 of a volt. And in some ways that's good, because it means you've got this tiny little 150 millivolts, 0.15 of a volt you've got to overcome. And when you've overcome it, you're in a very smooth mode. The problem with germanium and indium when put together is they were very temperature sensitive. And so if you had a situation where the temperature was rising, the device would conduct more electrons, and those electrons made more noise. So from an audio point of view, germanium was quite noisy. And when semiconductor companies realized that you could use a silicon substance rather than germanium, that was great. They were not temperature sensitive, and therefore they were not so noisy. And so we suddenly were going in the right direction. But the problem with them was that whereas the germanium had a 0.15 volt knee, the silicon had a 0.6 volt knee, 4 times as much. And therefore you had to employ bias, which is the term used for putting voltage onto the device, to get over that knee. So in some ways, they were not as clean, and they were not as smooth from a sound point of view. And you see the one thing that we all compare this with, of course, is the predecessor of the transistor, which was the tube, or in England, we'd say the valve. And, valve technology was what I'd cut my teeth on, because that was the Vox AC30. Yep. I worked on the AC50 principally. And then I moved on to the Super Beetle, which was a semiconductor product. But we still used tubes or valves in the output stage because we couldn't quite get the right sound at the beginning. So germanium, yes. Could we use it today? Yes. 5 years ago, I designed a whole range of foot pedals for guitar, which were designed specifically for the Rotor Sound company, who I mentioned earlier. With James Howe was the founder of Rotor Sound. His son, Jason, took it over, and I met up with him. And he said, I tell you what, let's do a whole range of pedals for guitar, but I want them to be as original as possible. And I said, the only way we can do that is if we go back to germanium. And it was a nightmare for us to build. We built those products for him, only because the availability of transistors in germanium format was rare. And when I did find a source of them, for every 1,000 transistors I could buy, probably 200 of them were usable. The other 800 we had to throw away because they just were so noisy. So that's the theme. Okay. Will they come back? I don't think so. I think there will be some esoteric companies, some boutique type builders who will say, yeah, I've just created this new hi-fi amp or whatever. But in reality, because as I say, it's all about evolution. We had to have germanium. The other problem with germanium was when it did get hot, its resistance went down. Okay. So it had a temperature coefficient, which was dangerous, because if you've got a current flowing through a thing and that current will make some heat. But if a device gets hot anyway, and the resistance gets lower, then the current gets greater and it gets bigger still.
Right.
So it's a loop. It's a positive feedback loop. We call it thermal runaway. Wow. And it means that if you leave it without any correction, it'll run away. It will get more destruction.
Right. Wow.
Okay.
I want to switch to digital for a bit. So are you happy to talk about the plugin?
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's start with the analog digital. Kind of let's bridge it with this quote that I've heard you make before. And that has to do with, do you still think there's a tangible gap between analog and digital? You mentioned it getting better. You love the sampling style of modeling hardware. But at one point you had said that until it hits 32-bit 500 kilohertz, we're probably not going to be there. You still believe that?
Yeah. Well, I do, but it's upset a lot of people. Not only did I say that to you,
I'm familiar with that one too.
I said it to a few, and they started throwing maths at me, mathematics. And they said, it's ridiculous. No one needs more than 44.1.
Perfectly represented.
Right.
And I said, well, listen, I don't want to offend you, but I can hear the difference. And I'm not Mr. Magic. I can hear the difference.
Right.
I think being a drummer helps, because most drummers, if they're serious and they want to buy a new cymbal, they'll walk into the drum store. I mean, it took me like 5 days to buy one cymbal once. And I was going there every day trying hundreds of cymbals, because there's harmonics that you hear.
Yeah.
And those harmonics are not at the fundamental frequency. Okay. So when guys say, I want my audio path to be, it's got to be flat to 35 kilohertz. Well, I even argue with that. My high-def EQ is flat to 80 kilohertz, 80.
Wow.
Because I know the harmonics contained in every sound. And it's not about the sine waves. It's about the rise time for the signal to occur. And so when you have a recording and you're recording, so I mean, one of the hardest things to record in any track, whether it's orchestral or what, is the tambourine, cowbell, and the triangle, because those instruments sound very basic, but those instruments have got such a fine balance of harmonics.
Yeah.
And when you strike a triangle, it might be 2,000 cycles, 2 kilohertz, but when you actually sample it and you look at it on a spectrum analyzer, it's got loads of harmonics going on right outside the audio band.
Right.
And we don't need to hear them as individual sine wave sources, because you get all the mathematic comes in. Oh, yeah, what's the matter, Mr. Oram? Don't you know what Fourier transforms are? And they become very insulting. and I could lecture on that if I needed to.
Shannon Nyquist and all that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Oh, Nyquist is the one. 44.1. Never need any more than that. And then you meet a video guy who's been working at 48K, and you say, are you happy at 44.1? And he went, no. No, I don't want to do it. And I like 48 because it's a multiple of 96.
Right.
And that's a multiple of 192. Right. And that's a multiple of 384. Yeah. And so we're getting up to my 500K.
Right.
And it was a bit of a tongue-in-cheek comment. Do I believe it? Yes, I do, because I have actually constructed signal paths with those sampling rates. And with blind listening tests, everybody has come back and they've all selected the 500 at 32-bit. Right. And they said, no, that's not even sampled. That's a bit of straight piece of wire. That's an analog piece. And you have to say, no, I'm sorry, it isn't. I'm going to open the unit up and show you. Will it come to that? Well, you see, it's all about bandwidth and power, energy. How much space is there, And I, having not been into plugins before, I've never realized quite how much how hungry some of these plugins can be, so much so that I ended up having to go out and buy the latest M1 Big Sur Mac and silicon chip device to prove to myself, which I'm glad I did, because it's a great machine, But the magic, if you like, I have to call it magic because I don't know how he's done it. The magic of the sampling that's within the Opal is of great intrigue. And there's been lots and lots of people that have bought it now and use it, and their praise is phenomenal. But amongst that group, there's a couple who've said, well, I don't like it because, my 25-year-old Mac falls over every time I turn it on. And I understand that. But I believe that the guys at Acustica are very smart. I don't know them well enough yet. I mean, normally in a non-COVID world, I would have flown out there, seen them, talked to them, dined with them, drunk with them, done all the things you do to get to understand the people. Unfortunately, all I've been able to do is do Zoom calls and video links, and it's great what we're discussing, but I've got so much to share with them, and their technical guys feel they want to hear it. So they want to share with me too. So the technical liaison that is going to come soon, I hope, is great. My unfortunate situation is that I did contract COVID-19 last March, and the guy I got it off died 25 days later. It's very sad because he was about to become a technical partner with me in recording. So it's very sad. And then after I got through it, within, as the hospital said, in the last 3 to 5 days, you've caught it again. So I had it twice, and that's in a way bad, but in a way good, because my body is loaded with antibodies against it, and I feel pretty safe.
Good. Good.
So I'm hoping we get out there and we carry on with a bit more work.
You know what? I hope as soon as this is over, I want to come out, because we want to come and let's get that console on the boat and let's have a good time. But anyway, I'm digressing a bit. Eric, you had a question about the tone or the sound of the plugin. Did you want to go ahead and throw down?
Yeah. Well, I thought, as I said at the beginning here, I feel like I can get away with a lot more EQ, when it's needed, with the high-def EQ, in terms of, I crank it up, so, there's 3 dBs, that's good, 6 still good, 12. It doesn't sound weird or broken the way a lot of other EQs do at that point. You can get more out of it if you need it. And I'm just wondering if you think there's anything about the design principles that might...
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, I've always believed that a good signal path in analog is about headroom. And the moment you restrict the headroom and you start distorting the signal that's going through the channel, once it's cracked up, you can't uncrack it. And that's the problem with many things in physics, in life generally. You can break something, but you can't always rebuild it. And when I started designing products, I saw to it that I could get more headroom through the systems. Now, an SSL or a Neve will have a headroom limitation of 24 dBs. Very good. A lower class product, maybe a Soundcraft, 21 dBs. And it's all to do with the rail voltages that's inside the power supply, giving enough energy to be converted to analog audio. And when I went about the Oram products, I said, no, it's not enough. I'm going to get plus 28 dB, and we'll do it by selecting special components that will cost us more money. Because if you go along to someone like Motorola or Texas or any of these semiconductor companies, they'll sell you a product, all right? And they'll sell you that product, and they'll say, okay, we'll operate on 20 volts maximum, okay? Well, you, as a good designer, you'll say, well, I'm never going to run them at 20 volts. I'm going to run them at 19 volts or 18 volts. So I have a little bit of leeway just in case. Well, I've never done that. And I'm revealing now some of my secrets, but I'm quite happy to do it because I feel that if more engineers can listen and follow the lead, that will solve other problems. Maybe the standard of audio will go up. It probably won't earn me anymore, but I shouldn't I shouldn't be worried about that. And the technique that I employ is I go to companies like Motorola and say, you've got this great product. I love it. It's got a max of 20 volts. I want you to tell me what yield you can give on the basis of, say, you make 100,000 of them. How many of them could be selected to actually operate at 23 volts? And they go, well, yeah, some of them do. They come through, they're what we call mil spec or military spec. Mm-hmm. And yeah, some will go to 24. Okay, fine. Now you tell me how much you want to select those for me and how many can I get? And the very first op-amp ever used in consoles was me developing with Texas Instruments a chip, and it was normally plus or minus 18 volts. I got it batch selected at plus or minus 20. So the Series 80 consoles had this specific device that had more rail volts, and therefore it gave you more output volts. So with what we're saying here is that if you're going to design a circuit, it's no good putting in a signal that's got a nice range, a nice wide difference between soft and loud. Forget the soft bit at the moment, just the loud bit. It's no good if you put that loud bit into the circuit and then the quarter of the way into the circuit, it's reduced it to a figure. Okay. We all know we can amplify it back up, but it's never the same. Putting in more amplification means more noise, and the distortions are not the same. And so the trick, the key, is to see that if you're going to handle a signal that big, you got to make sure that it goes all the way through all the circuits that big. Okay. And if you've got something like an EQ where you're going to wind up some HF and you want a bit more or a bit more or a bit more, you got to make sure that there's enough room for all that signal. Now, if we're talking about zero VU in an analog sense, okay, zero VU is plus 4. So in one of my systems with plus 28 throughout, you've got 24 decibels of movement. And it's more than you'd ever want, okay? Yep. It's more. And we're assuming that the signal can be made that big. If the signal is all got no harmonics and it's flat and it's right down minus 10, you're not going to get anywhere near plus 28 anyway.
Right.
But that's the trick, and that's what I've developed. Now, what the guy at Acustica has done, and I know he's a freelance guy, I don't think he's one of their permanent staff, but I had a long conversation with him. We had a lot of video chats. I sent him all the circuit diagrams, which have never been seen by anybody. Okay, it's always been top secret. And I sent him those, and he was quite amazed. He read them through and he went, I've not seen circuit design like this before. And I said, yeah, I'm glad you said that, because no one else has, I hope. But it's no secret. It's just a design philosophy. Mm-hmm. Give yourself lots and lots of headroom, put it in. And he managed to see that come through in this plug. And
really,
when you are looking at bands, you got a low and two mids and a high, and then you got some bells and some shells. All those bands have to be independent in their own right, which in that circuit they are. So it's a pretty involved GUI. The user interface is a bit busy. But it's because every band, every one of 8 bands, has got its own separate circuit complete. There's not one circuit depending on the next one or the next one. It's not sharing anything. It makes the unit expensive. Okay. I mean, the hardware is, £3,000, £3,300. Although we're cutting deals now because so many people that bought the software are saying, if only I had the hardware. So we're selling them as well. And that's good. That's good business. But the important thing here is that technology of mine says that if you took out one part of the circuit completely on its own, it would work completely on its own. It doesn't depend on any other part.
Wow.
And that's important because you're not sharing. You have got to be crafty in where you put those bricks, okay? Because in the circuit flow, you may not want the bricks in the same order that they are on the front panel. So you must not assume that the low cut filter, right, the high pass, although it's the first one in the whole GUI when you look down there, inside the unit, it's not there at all. It's right at the back because you want it to cut any hum or low frequency noise component that will be coming through, not due to the unit doesn't hum, but due to the signal path that you're putting into it. So you might have a bass guitar through an amplifier and it's got a hum on it and it's not very pleasant. The Opal and the High-Def have the ability to remove all of that before it goes out to the outside world.
Mm-hmm. It's as I'm listening to this, I'm hearing that there's so many design choices that you make, not only in this unit, but throughout your career that really contribute to this signature sound. And I encourage everyone, if you haven't tried the plugin, download the trial and get it in your ears and check it out. You'll hear some of these differences that we're talking about. And it's really, as an artist, you got to make choices about what kind of sound you want, and you got to know your tools and know which tools get you that sound. And this has really got this great classic analog vibe, but it's also the word high def is a great word for it, Now, before we close, because this has been such an honor for us, John, and I hope we have a chance to speak with you again.
I hope so too. Yeah.
I've got one, and thanks for being on the Mixorcist. We're two crazy dudes from Canada, but we really love what you do.
Yeah. And another question too that we have to hit.
Okay, well, I know we want to talk about your hardware, and I know you mentioned cutting deals, and one of the things I love about you is how you do your business. So I'm going to open up the floor for you to do that too. But one last question, real quick. You've been talking about the future of artists for a long time. You spoke about it even already today. What do you think once this whole COVID thing is over? Do you have any ideas or thoughts about, what can we do to preserve the art of recorded music and great recordings and great performances and great music? Everything is free now, and we're losing a little bit of the appreciation for the art form. So I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that after, a wonderful, illustrious career, and then go nuts. Talk about whatever. Well, I'll let Eric ask his last question too.
Well, I just wanted to ask about Star Wars and Skywalker and all that, because we started to talk about that last time, and then we had to go, and I was fascinated.
Yeah. Well, again, it's who you meet, when you meet them, how do you get on with them? Are you able to offer anything? I met George Lucas in 1975 when he came over to Shepperton Film Studios, which was a studio in bankruptcy. It was about to close, and I'm sure he was using it because it was the right place to go, because it didn't cost too much, and to hire the facility. The place never did close. It was due to be closed, and on the morning of the official receiver, as he's called, the guy that shuts the business down, Pete Townsend of The Who flew in his own helicopter and gave him a check for $3 million and saved the business. I'm back in the 70s, but that's a true story. But no, I knew that the Skywalker were working on lots of movies and things, and Christopher Boyes, who was the sound designer, was having a problem getting the headroom right again. Headroom. George had bought a German freighter, a ship that had the same lever engines in that the Titanic had, and he was renting the Bay of Mexico, as you do, and the whole philosophy was James Cameron wanted to sink, the director wanted to sink that boat and record the with the engine running, of course. And when the cold water rushes into a red hot engine boiler, the explosion is phenomenal. And he wanted to recreate that authentically, which he did. But of course, he only had one chance to blow the freighter up, and they had a lot of sound techs who were in wetsuits in the water with HHB digital recorders in polythene bags and microphones on their heads and these crazy rig to capture the various sounds. And I heard from Christopher Boyes, and he said, look, I'm just concerned. I know your boards have high headroom, but I need a super, super high headroom, because when I'm going to do the sound design and I get this explosion, assuming that we're able to catch it, I need your help. I need to know how to get it and put it all together. And I created a board, a 32 channel. There's pictures of it on my website, in fact, of me sitting next to Chris, taking him through the functionality. Not that he needed much learning. I mean, he was a brilliant sound designer. And of course, he won an Oscar for sound design. The movie got an Oscar for the audio path as well. So it won two Oscars for sound. And it was a great thing. And I worked in conjunction with a friend of mine who is one of the best acoustics engineers up from Santa Barbara, Chris Polonis. He created the room, and I put the desk in there according to what Christopher Boyes wanted. And, you know, it was all about a headroom again. When this explosion comes, and naturally, you know, he's looking at oscilloscopes, he's looking at the waveform. And if you clip that waveform, it's all over. And that's always been my anti-feeling about digital, because you can take liberties in analog domain, you know, particularly if it's a tape machine running. You can push and push, and you can go well past the headroom, and it just gently, softly compresses it. And you can live with it. But obviously with digital stuff, the moment you exceed that limit, whatever you set it at, it's a crunch and it's horrible.
So did you get it?
Yes.
You got it?
Yeah.
Nice.
No,
Nice.
We did well, you've seen the movie, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And the result is phenomenal. And but it was a project, again, you see, and you don't know what you're doing when you start it, because if it was so predictable, so certain, it wouldn't be a problem. I probably wouldn't be involved in it. So I think the great thing about that connection, and of course I did a lot more work with Skywalker. They bought a lot of my products over the years. But again, the magic product is always the high-def. And on my website, which is at oram.co.uk, there's, when you go up there, you'll see there's a picture of Chris Boyes. I'm sitting next to him, but there's also a high-def in the picture. And he says, you know, I forget what he calls me now, a phenomenon. I think it is. You are something of a phenomenon. Yeah, you put the depth in the lows and the something in the highs, and your products have headroom that goes on for days. That's what he puts.
That's got to feel good.
Yeah.
So let me tap your brain on just that. Well, one last question. What can we do to keep recorded music alive? What do you think the future looks like?
I think that a lot of the guys, and I've proved this now by listening in on the Acustica Facebook page. There's a lot of guys on there who are not recording punk rock and overdriven metal. Right. And I don't have a problem with that. But it's a bit soul destroying when you've worked hard all your life to make something sound clean, and they go and mess it up.
Range.
The funny part is that when you go there's a lot of those Acustica guys who are working with in the box with not just Opal. They're using, some of the guys are using 12, 13, 14 plugins. and they're producing orchestral big band type sounds, which are stunning. Now, I know the mass populace may not want that, but the great thing about life is that, you know, kids who love rock and roll grow up. And when they grow up, they move into other genre, and they get into jazz, and they get into big band. And then they realize there was, you know, guys called Benny Goodman and Glenn Miller were making music, and they discover them all over again, you know. I mean, I got a friend, I'm living on a boat at the moment, and I've just met a Hungarian guy, and he's just discovered Dave Brubeck. And he said, I just hear that. And he's going off about Dave's polytonality and polyrhythms and stuff. And I've got a lot of music on my boat here, on my yacht. And I said, yeah, what do you think of this? And of course, I've got CDs, some of which I've made myself in an MP3 format. So I've got, you know, 10 albums on one CD. It's not my favorite listening medium, MP3, but it's nice for background, and you can get so much stuff on. And of course, he freaked out, and he said, gee, can I borrow the CD? I said, no, because unless your player will play MP3, it won't work. But no, I mean, I think that we're, you know, I mean, all life is cyclic, you know, and the quality, coming back to your question, the quality that we're used to hearing in a analog sense is light years ahead, even though it's from the past. It's light years ahead of what so many kids are hearing, you know. And I talk to young folk, obviously. Some of them, you know, I mean, A, they've never heard of John Oram, so there's a problem. I have to bore them for a couple of hours. And then B, they've never heard of the Beatles and the fact that I worked with those guys. I was George Harrison's guitar tech. I've still got one of his guitars in a museum in Germany. In fact, just signed a contract again to let them have it a bit longer. So, you know, but they've never heard a CD. And, you know, MP3 is something of a luxury to them because all they've ever heard is what they've heard on earbuds, you know, and when you actually get them to listen to proper sound, real sound, who knows? I mean, I've just sold a pair of Tannoy 215s, not mine, but another pair that I owned. And, you know, I was amazed. I mean, I paid, I don't know, $1,000 from Tannoy when they were my distributors in Kitchener, in your country. And I thought, I don't know, must have paid $1,000 US, that would be. And I've just sold them for 11,000.
Wow.
Yeah. And I've still got the phone ringing. Have you still got those monitors?
Really?
So, so, you know, good stuff will come back with the standard of that Acustica achieve. And I know I keep saying their name. I've got no reason. I'm not on their payroll. I mean, I turned down a lot of companies for plugins for me because they did not sound right. And I could easily have taken the money and had a product out there that looked like my thing. But you see, that isn't what I was born for.
Right.
And, you know, I'm a total believer in destiny. Everything is mapped out already. I've got some problems now physically. I don't know how that's going to happen. You know, I don't know. I mean, if I lose my eyesight, maybe my ears will be 10 times more sensitive. I don't know. I'm not suggesting that, and I don't want that to happen. But I'm just saying, you know, I know some phenomenal blind pianists who, you know, and you can't argue with this. The human frame that we've got is pretty frail, pretty fragile, but we are going to get better in what we do electronically. And the fact that certain Acustica customers complain because their computer kills over, well, you know, fine. You have to move with the times and get the faster machine. Experience is everything, you know. And I was 70 when I got COVID the first time, 71 the second time. I don't intend to get it again if I can help it. But I do need to be doing some of the things that I enjoyed doing, like getting together and sharing our time and whatever, But it's not over yet. And I know when my ultimate compressor is a product called the Sonicomp 2. That is unique. Every Oram product has a novelty of some kind or other. The novelty in the high-def was the detail switch from plus or minus 6 to plus or minus 18. That was the key novelty. The novelty in the Sonicomp is that there's a switch on the front that switches in an optical attenuator or a solid state attenuator.
Nice.
So you can go from, Joe Meek to Fairchild in one button, and you can hear it in, out, and it's a great effect. Because if you're not sure, a lot of guys, they buy compressors, they don't understand them. They don't understand what is the attack time, what is the release time, what does that mean, what's the threshold, what is a ratio? And I sit down with a pencil and paper, I can explain it. But most guys don't sit down and have it explained. They just plug it in and they fiddle around and, suddenly you're a hit record producer, and you are if it sells, and you get your Grammy, and you still don't know. We had a rock and roll producer in England for years called Mickey Most, and he was having chart hit after chart hit after chart hit.
Rec Studios. RK?
Yeah, you got it. Yeah, sure. And I met Mickey, and I used to watch him, and he'd be sort of talking to somebody over there while he's adjusting controls, and his ears are telling him when it's sounding all right. There was no scientific management. He didn't need it. He knew that if he could get on this thing with all these knobs and he fiddled with them enough, he could make really great music, and he did. And I'm not knocking him for it. It's a subjective art form,
Of course. One final question, really, to wrap things up, John, is where can people get some of your gear? I know Eric and I are fighting over which piece we want to buy. So where can tell the folks about getting some of that hardware?
Okay, fine. I have a factory in England, and I have a factory in Poland because my wife is Polish. And the reason why I have those two operations is knowing that England was breaking away from Europe. I wanted to have a distribution center in both countries so that I could ship products without lots of tariffs and duties and overkill. And it's completely legal. There's nothing illegal about it. The thing to do is to contact me. My name is John Oram. I have an email which is john@johnoram.com. It's very simple. john@johnoram.com, or find me on Facebook. I'm there. Or if not, contact me on my website, which is oram.co.uk. That's co.uk. On there is a little box for contact. It says, please give us your telephone number because John will call you, and I will. And I still amaze people who get a phone call from me. I call every customer. I do not, I deal directly. I try and study the end user's life, his problems. And what that means, I don't give the gear away, but I do flex my price points to see that everybody can have a fair go. I have customers too who ring up and say, I want 5 Sonicomps and 2 high-defs. Send me the invoice, and they're not interested in a discount anyway. So fine, I'm happy to do that, although I might make them a special deal on something. And so, I want to work with everybody. I want people to share my experience. I don't have a problem talking to people. I'm happy to video link. I'm happy to talk direct. I'm on WhatsApp, which is an easy way of videoing me. And let's get together. john@johnoram.com. oram.co.uk is the website. You can contact me there. And just let's have a discussion. I do also get second user items. You never see an Oram piece on eBay or the major sites. They're not there. The reason is that I tell everybody when you buy something that if you want to upgrade it or downgrade it or side grade it or buy another one, contact me, because I buy back virtually everything that I've ever sold. Really? And so it's good. So if you buy a 16-channel console, I'll give you a really good price. Use it. If in a year or two, most of my stuff has a 3-year warranty or 4 years. Again, I've got good people, good teams of people, and we are very keen to have you as our customer. So let's see.
Love the way you do business. That's really important. And I hope everyone watching this today grabs a piece of Oram gear at some point in their lives, because I think it's an experience, and you're touching hands with musical history. So John, I got to thank you for spending time with us today. This has been a real pleasure.
Thank you too. I mean, I'm still totally confused about Mixorcist, because I read what was online and it said you were both dead.
Yeah. We've been dead for a long time. That's on our Instagram. We're having a go at people. We're talking horror movies, so we're talking zombie apocalypse there. But it's been a real treat to have you on this show. You're our first actual guest, to be honest, and we hope to not only work with you again, but I can't wait for the day. We get to meet you in person and shake your hand, sir, because this has been a lot of fun. Eric, any closing thoughts?
Oh, just amazing. Thank you so much. Just
well, good luck to you.
A lot to think about. I learned a lot. And,
thank you, sir.
No, I love what you're doing. I like the approach. Nice. As I say, I won't be stuck on this boat with lousy 4G connection forever. In fact, I have another yacht in Spain where I live. And as soon as I can get an aeroplane ticket, I'm going there, because that's another nice place to be. But my studio out there, I'm closing that, and I'm going to start again. But there'll probably be a new studio in either Marbella or Malaga. That's further down in the Spanish coast. But I've got a lot of people who want to work with me, which is very encouraging. Good engineers who have said, look, I'll come for nothing. I just want to work in your environment.
It's incredible.
And of course, that won't happen. I will pay everybody. But I think the deal is such that it's just nice to know there's a following who want to do it.
Beautiful. John, thank you so much for your time. Much continued good health to you. Much continued success. And I promise we'll see you again.
Please.
Take care, my friend.
All right,
see you guys. Yeah. Bye-bye.